This is Joshua Stulman from BrooklynComicShop.com, here today to go over the 101 on Captain Marvel Shazam. That's right, Captain Marvel Shazam comes out this week, this April 2019. We've been waiting for this movie for quite a while. It's the next in the lineup of DC's extended universe, following up on Wonder Woman and Aquaman this past December. Captain Marvel has a long history, however, it's not always with DC Comics. What you're looking at right now is a couple of the Golden Age books from Captain Marvel's history done by Fawcett Comics. These were part of a Golden Age collection we just recently acquired, and they actually are up for sale on our website, BrooklynComicShop.com. So anything I show you today, you can actually order if you like it, but I'm going to go through the history of Captain Marvel. So this guy, Captain Marvel, Shazam, as he's being called now, not the female Captain Marvel from Marvel Comics, not the Captain Marvel that splits apart in a robot from the 1960s. This is the actual Captain Marvel. And you can see him in Wiz Comics, which was his first appearance, issue number 2. Now this is issue number 126. This is from around 1951, 1950. So about 10 years after his debut, you have Captain Marvel still going strong, to much the chagrin of DC Comics, which was constantly pursuing the character in legal dispute, and it kept the whole company in the courthouse for about a decade till they finally folded. The original company was Fawcett Comics, and for their superhero line, they had a number of superheroes in the early 40s, including Captain Marvel. But towards the 50s, it really just came down to Captain Marvel and his family. So just to show you how popular Captain Marvel was, he had a series of many different comic lines, actually. So Wiz was the first, then he had Captain Marvel Adventures. And one of the reasons I love Captain Marvel in general, as I collect Captain Marvel, is he goes through all the genres of comics from the Golden Age. So when superhero and the war is popular, he's fighting the war. Afterwards, magic, he's doing that. When it comes to horror comics, you have a little bit of horror themes. When it comes to westerns, you have western themes. He really goes through all the Golden Age period of 1940s through the 1950s. He's even fighting communists in the end. He's a character that constantly was evolving with the times, and I think that's why DC Comics with Superman felt that he was such a threat, because he really was popular enough to support really all of the superhero line that Fawcett was putting out, especially in the 1950s. And these are very early 1950s books. These are 1950, 1951, 1952. One of the early spin-offs from the Captain Marvel was Captain Marvel Jr. Jr. was introduced during the war. He was disabled. He was disabled in a fight that left him lame, and to save his life, Captain Marvel basically lent him his power. But instead of growing into a full adult, he became just Captain Marvel Jr., a teenager in and out of his superhero abilities. Captain Marvel Jr. was so popular, of course, that DC would eventually introduce their own version called Superboy. But it was Captain Marvel Jr. that really first led the younger generation being a superhero. And he was pretty popular. You can see that he's not only in Captain Marvel Jr. comics, he's also in Master Comics, which was another one. And because this is from the early 50s, you're starting to see the influence of the Western comics come in with the Tom Mix character that they're advertising now. And that's one of the major genres that shifted during the 1950s, was, especially the early part, was the influx of Western comics. So you have Master Comics, you have Captain Marvel Jr., you've got Wiz Comics, Captain Marvel Adventures. Now you have the Marvel family. This is both Captain Marvel Jr., and Mary Marvel, which is Captain Marvel's sister, Mary Marvel. And so these all three were featured in Marvel Family. Mary Marvel also had her own comics. She had Mary Marvel comics. She had WoW comics. There was also America's Best Comics, which I believe only was in the 1940s for a couple of issues. But these were all the Marvel family. So in this series, if you wanted to read all three people together, then you could read that. Now, from the collection that we did purchase, there was an awful lot of Captain Marvel Jr. There was also an awful lot of Superboy, so you can see where the tastes were for a youngster growing up, that they really did gravitate towards Captain Marvel Jr., Superboy Adventures, Adventure Comics. So these were some of the ones that we got from the collection. All dating from 1949 to 1953. And the company really stopped publication in the 50s, really due to DC's constant badgering in the courthouse. You can see just a little bit of cross-promotion here. Captain Marvel and the Good Humor Man. So this was a one-shot that was done in 1950, 1951, around that time period. Still showing the advertising cachet that Captain Marvel had and the influence he had, that, you know, the Good Humor Man, the ice cream company, could team up and produce a comic book to bring in new audiences, or to just show how relevant their own product was at the time. Some additional Captain Marvels. Some of the junior ones. Here you get some of the witches and wizardry themes that were coming in the 1950s. I think Prince Valiant. Here you get three. I mean, these are pretty thick books. So you get a lot of story here. I like the negative Captain Marvel Jr. there. And the end of Master Comics, another horror-themed book. Now, after DC was successful in really suing the hell out of Fawcett, the company went defunct. EC Comics, coincidentally, also went defunct in the mid-50s due to the Comics Code and the restrictions put on them. That was obviously for a different reason. But Captain Marvel was still one of the most popular recognized characters. Out of production, DC went ahead and decided that they were going to steal the costume. And so what you have here is the Flash introduced in around 1956, the beginning of the Silver Age. You have Julius Schwartz going back and reinvigorating the older 1940s characters from DC Comics. And because Captain Marvel is now no longer published, he's literally stealing the costume. And you can see the yellow boots, the primary red color. Notice there's no underpants here. It's just a straight belt across, just like in Captain Marvel. And of course, the lightning bolt on both of their chests. Now, all DC really did is they gave him a mask and took away the cape. But really, what you're looking at is Captain Marvel now with just a little bit different powers. In fact, less powers than the original one. So Flash has speed, Captain Marvel has Mercury's speed. So you get both. But in the 1970s, especially after Marvel started coming up with Captain Marvel characters in their own version, which was completely different, DC went back to Fawcett and licensed the character. And now Captain Marvel was being used by DC legally. Captain Marvel Adventures continued with C.C. Beck, who had created the character in the 1940s. Now, in the 1970s, C.C. Beck was working for DC and also did the Shazam reboot. Although it was really a continuation of the 1950s series, DC was no longer allowed to advertise Captain Marvel. Even though they have the logo here, the title is now Shazam. And because of this use of logo, Stanley at Marvel Comics went back and sued DC, sent a cease and desist order to not use the Captain Marvel logo or name featured on the cover because it would conflict with their use of their own Captain Marvel property. So eventually, I think after the 16th issue or so, the title just changed to Shazam, and Captain Marvel is no longer seen on the cover in text. What you have here is issue number 4. This is from the 1970s. And what's special, and you can also find this one on my website, this book has been autographed by C.C. Beck. You can see it's also been autographed by Denny O'Neil, who is the writer. He's also a famous Batman writer, but for our purposes today, he's the Shazam reboot writer. And you can see Captain Marvel on the inside. There are the credits, Denny O'Neil and C.C. Beck. You want to know what Shazam stands for? Here's the close-up. Solomon, Hercules, Atlas, Zeus, Achilles, and Mercury. done by the original artist in the revival. Now, C.C. Beck only did the book for a couple of issues. He was known to be a bit of a curmudgeon, so eventually he fell out of favor, either wanting to do the book or just in general with DC. So having a signed Captain Marvel book by him is quite rare. The other thing that DC did in the 70s, aside from bringing back Captain Marvel, is they also did a TV show. And this was done for Saturday morning. Not a cartoon, but a live action one. They then took some of the older 1950s books and put them into these larger format Treasury editions. And this starred Jackson Bostwick as Shazam, Captain Marvel. And here they went on adventures across the country. And you could follow them for about 3 seasons till they were cut off the air. It then continued with a Captain Marvel cartoon show, I believe, in the 1980s. And by the time the 80s came around, DC decided they were done licensing a lot of the characters that they had previously paid money to use, but not directly owned. And so they made a bid to just outright buy Captain Marvel, the entire library of Charlton Comics. You had Quality Comics, which had Blue Beetle and a number of those characters, Uncle Sam. And they also bought out Fawcett Comics, which was Captain Marvel. Now called Shazam officially on the covers. You can see the origin kind of being updated with more modern art. Tom Mandrake did the artwork. He was very popular at the time. Roy Thomas did the writing. He's a Golden Age historian. Also used to work for Marvel, but his main love is integrating 1940s history with the modern history. And you can see it's signed by both. Captain Marvel, now Shazam, going up against Black Adam. This one's an interesting book, not just because it's the 3rd issue and it's a fun cover. This actually has a factory error, where you can see there's a little bit of... The staples are on the side, but the page has been actually pulled over. It's a factory printing error in really nice shape. In the 1980s, DC did a really good job of integrating Captain Marvel into the rest of their continuity. So you had the miniseries, and then followed up by the miniseries, you had the Legends miniseries done by John Byrne, which actually incorporated Captain Marvel into the Justice League, along with Blue Beetle and some of the other characters that DC had recently acquired. So you had Captain Marvel being exposed to a new audience, integrated with the DC world, Batman, Superman, all appearing alongside Captain Marvel, now Shazam, but still called Captain Marvel on the inside. In the mid-90s, Jared Ordway did a graphic novel, The Power of Shazam, which was so popular it was spun off into its own monthly book, which ran for about 50 issues, called The Power of Shazam, that really went through a lot of the characters' revitalized history. But when DC was coming out with concepts for this cinematic universe, they developed and revitalized the company and rebranded the company as the New 52. And here we have an example of the New 52 Justice League. Superman redesigned without underwear because that was considered weird. A lot of the features of the New 52 were making the characters grittier, making the characters more realistic and translatable to film. And this is where we get the Wonder Woman incarnation, the Aquaman incarnation from the movie, is a mixture of influences from the New 52. And in this issue, issue number 7, you get the beginning of the introduction of Shazam, now no longer Captain Marvel, just called Shazam. And you have that running in issue 7 through 11 with the new version of Shazam debuting officially in Justice League number 0. And here you can see a lot has been changed about the costuming, a lot of texture added across the chest, the belt made much larger, the cape extended fully down instead of it being a half cape. Keeping the bracelets is nice. The Captain Marvel energy symbol really just bursting forth, almost like an Iron Man influence, kind of the Thor influence, God of Thunder, although Shazam is not the God of Thunder. But really something to really modernize the look and feel of the character. And this was done specifically to translate it to film and for the upcoming movie. And in fact, they used this cover as their advertisement in New York Comic Con 2018 to help promote the movie coming out. And here you see it says Shazam 2019. You can see it's the same artwork. The interior of the book is actually the same as number 0. So it's going to give you the official new DC origin for Shazam. And this is actually more of an exclusive for the New York Comic Con, but just kind of gives you an idea of where they were thinking right before the movie coming out. And so the movie comes out this week, April 2019. I hope you enjoyed watching this. I hope that it was informational for you. If you see anything you liked in this video, you can order it online, brooklyncomicsshop.com. We will also find vintage Golden Age comic books, modern books, signed comic books, action figures, playsets, original art, art prints, and much more. brooklyncomicsshop.com. Thank you for watching.